And just to show off some of the customization that we have with expanded containers, I'm going to show you what these context nodes actually do. So it's very similar to the create event node, but there's a couple differences. There is the drop down, and you can toggle between which one you select, but the main difference is that the delegates, the create events, are strongly typed, but in expanded containers, the context is not strongly typed. So that means that, for example, with our remove by predicate, we can have a function that we're going to use that can either take a name or a gameplay tag container, or it can take a name then a gameplay tag container, or it can take a gameplay tag container and then a name. The only hard requirement is that it has to take one or the other, and it also has to return a Boolean. And of course, if we double click on this, it will take us directly to the function that we've selected, and this works. This wasn't pre-baked. Again, very similar to the create event node. In contrast to the create event node, there's quite a bit of customization as to what appears on these nodes. So if I go over here to the project settings, on the expanded containers page, we have a whole lot of settings here, and I'm going to go ahead and dock this right there. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and move this over here, and then we'll sort of resize it. Part of this node will update in real time, and the other part won't. So let's say that we want to use, instead of this bracket notation, let's say we want to have traditional commas. Well, we can. And if we want to quote names and stuff like that, we can do that. So we'll have a tilde in here, I think. If we want to quote types, we can add a tilde. And you'll see there that the node updates and it's showing us our type quotes and all that fun stuff. We'll go ahead and remove that for now. We can also change sort of the types that we see. So here's the raw C++ representation of the type. But if we don't want the prefix, we can get rid of it. We can also change what we see. So if we want to include names, we can include the names. And of course, now this would work. So now the names have a 1 on either side. We can go back to the tilde because that looks nicer. We can also include qualifiers, although that won't change anything because the qualifiers, there just aren't any. It's not constant and it's not a reference. If I were to make it a reference, it would obviously be a reference, but it's not. Now, interestingly, I can show the hidden stuff here. There's actually a hidden parameter to this function called the world context. This is because it's a static function library. And in order for you to be able to print to the screen or do anything relying with a world, you have to have a world context. And this is inserted automatically. If we go to this function, there isn't a world context input here. So because there isn't a world context there, you probably don't want to see it because it doesn't mean anything to you. But expanded containers just handles that implicitly. So there's no reason to actually show it. And we'll get rid of the names and the qualifiers as well. Keep the nodes really short. So one of the other things that you'll notice is if you hover over this, you get this big old keyword legend. And I pointed this out earlier, but you can customize what keywords are used here. And we've got full qualifiers and basic qualifiers. In practice, you actually don't have to have both of these exposed, but I wanted 2 sets of defaults. I've provided an option for you to toggle between these defaults, but the only bad thing is that you have to actually refresh the node to see it. So now if I hover over this, you'll notice that the simplified signature is the basic words, and the tooltip is now in the more complicated, more descriptive qualifiers set. But of course, you can change any of these. So if I wanted to, I I could say return val, and I have to refresh the nodes because this doesn't automatically update. But now you'll notice that the tooltip has been updated and it now says return val. So I'm working on more settings to expose. One of these settings would be the actual output of the toString node. You would have noticed in some of the earlier demos that the toString node is sort of different to the regular notation. I want to make that user configurable so that you can control exactly how that looks, and in a similar fashion to this.